What's up, everyone? My name is Ethan. Welcome to Splash City. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe, and let's get into it. So today, we're going to talk about something that has been making me, I don't know if mad is the right word, maybe frustrated over the past couple of days. And that is all this discourse on NBA Twitter right now that's been going around because we're in the pits of the offseason right now, right? And there's not much going on to talk about in the NBA other than Ben Simmons, but I've given my whole opinion on that, and we're not going back to Ben Simmons. I think everybody's kind of been talking in circles about Ben Simmons for the last month or so, ever since the Sixers season ended. I guess it's probably been almost 2 months now. That we've just been talking about Ben Simmons, and that's really the only thing that's left. That's the last domino for the offseason to fall. All the free agents have signed. Draft is, long over. Summer league is done. We're just basically biding our time until training camp kicks off in about a month now. So, what does that, lead NBA fans to do? Well, we devolve back into these circular player arguments, like who's better at this specific thing, who's higher all time, blah 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 blah, right? And that's just what NBA Twitter does, right? And that can be fun, right? And that's all well and good if you're having those arguments in good faith and stuff like that. But specifically, sometimes it just kind of gets to a point where people just talk in circles, and it's just stan culture, and it's not really productive or anything like that. And it just gets kind of silly. And so today, it's kind of a broad topic, but I did kind of just want to talk about skill in basketball and what that means and how do we quantify that, and ultimately draw this back to a comparison that's being made of Steph Curry and Kyrie Irving. So I'll try my best to kind of explain this whole situation if you're not familiar, and let's get into it. So all this kind of got started with a debate about Kyrie Irving on Twitter because somebody posted like a Mount Rushmore of the most skilled players in basketball history or most talented scorers or whatever, right? And a lot of people were replying to that and saying that Kyrie Irving deserves to be on there, one of the most skilled, talented scorers in basketball, right? And that's completely fair, right? If we're talking about who has like the most one of the best handles in the NBA, absolutely, maybe the best handle in the history of the NBA if we're talking about Kyrie Irving, as well as his ability to finish around the rim, his layup package, all stuff like that, right? If that's what you're talking about, basketball skill, right? If you're qualifying skill as just your handle and your finishing around the rim ability, then definitely I think Kyrie Irving would have an argument for that. But I think what a lot of people are kind of debating on about this topic is what skill actually means in a broad sense, right? Because it seems to me like a lot of people consider basketball skill to be just dribbling and finishing. Like that's what you think of when you think of a skilled basketball player, is somebody who has a really strong handle, can beat you off the dribble, and can finish well around the rim, right? And usually that goes more also towards a player who maybe is a little bit smaller and not quite as big and strong, and so they have to kind of do those things in order to score. And it's really aesthetically pleasing, and it's fun basketball to watch, right? And I think at the top of that list would be somebody like Kyrie Irving. And so where the difference comes in is when people will say Kyrie is the most skilled basketball player in the world right now, then other people will see that, and if you're a fan of somebody else who's not Kyrie, you're automatically going to say, well, what about this other thing? What about this other thing? Does this qualify as skill, right? What qualifies somebody being skilled at basketball? And so I think what the disconnect is that a lot of Kyrie Irving fans have skill as just dribbling and finishing, and a lot of people who are fans of anybody else consider skill to be like, obviously shooting. You can consider rebounding a skill. You can consider, passing a skill, your playmaking ability, that's a skill, right? Do you want to consider defense a skill, right? Like a skill could be a broad term to describe just any facet of the game of basketball, maybe other than athleticism, because people tend to kind of separate those two things, right? Skill and athleticism, you put those two things together, that's what makes up how good of a basketball player you are. So that's the disconnect on this argument is skill. Does that just mean, the really flashy stuff that gets you on highlight reels, or is that, making up everything that you are as an NBA player? So that's where I feel like the disconnect is with this topic. And so, of course, right, people are talking about Kyrie Irving, and this is NBA Twitter, so there's stands for every player on there, right? So every other player, every other guard that's in the conversation for, a really skilled player is going to have people, in this conversation about Kyrie Irving bringing up, well, what about Steph Curry? What about James Harden? What about Damian Lillard? What about blah, 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 blah? The list goes on, right? Of all these players that are really talented guards. And so, I don't think it's a mystery where I stand on this argument. I'm a big Steph Curry fan, and I feel like he is definitely one of the most skilled players in the league. And so this all came to a head here when Mike James, just mentioned that he wanted, he felt like Kyrie Irving should be on the Mount Rushmore for most skilled basketball player of all time, right? If you don't know, Mike James played for the Brooklyn Nets last year, is currently a free agent unsigned. So he does not have a team yet for next season. He might catch on somewhere, but he did play in Brooklyn with Kyrie last season, right? So he chimes in, people in his comments are saying, well, what about Steph Curry? What about Steph Curry? You're arguing for Kyrie Irving. What about Steph? And he goes, Kyrie is more skilled than Steph. Steph just shoot better. Everything is in Kyrie's favor skill-wise, but whatever you say. So that's a common argument that I think a lot of people make, especially when talking about Steph Curry, but a lot of other players, is we kind of put these players in a box, right? And we are when we look at these players and think of the first thing that comes to mind when we think about them, right? So when you think about Kyrie Irving, what's the first thing that's going to come to your mind? Well, it's probably going to be his handle, his dribble package, and his finishing around the rim, right? Those are the first things that come into your head when you think about Kyrie Irving as the player. Steph Curry, on the other hand, what's the first thing you think about when you think about Steph Curry? Obviously, it's the shooting, right? He's the best shooter in the NBA, best shooter in the history of the NBA, and is clearly leagues above everybody at that one particular thing. So Kyrie Irving, it's the ball handling, and Steph Curry, it's the shooting. And so I think for a lot of people, when they think about skill in basketball, and if they consider that to be, dribbling, and if you consider that to be the main skill that people think about when you're considering basketball skill, then of course Kyrie Irving is going to jump off the page as the most skilled basketball player. And then a lot of people who are big fans of Steph Curry as well are going to reply to that and say, well, Steph and Kyrie are kind of 1A, 1B in terms of ball handling and rim finishing, for guards their size, right? Because Steph Curry has an amazing handle as well, and he has an amazing ability to finish around the rim. And regardless of who you think is better, I think most people would agree that Kyrie and Steph are the two best at those things, right? So people are going to try to debate on who is better depending on who you're a fan of. And so when people are talking about Kyrie Irving as the most skilled in that area, people are of course going to bring up Steph and vice versa, right? So people are turning this into an argument between the two players. So then, obviously, if you're saying that Kyrie Irving is a more skilled basketball player than Steph, then a lot of people are going to bring up this counterpoint, which I think is a really good point. This dude says, if Steph is less skilled and him and Kyrie are basically the same size, then why is Steph the better player? What's the difference maker? Because when you look at them on paper, they are, similar size and weight and strength, right? I don't know off the top of my head. I think Steph is listed at 6'3" and Kyrie's probably 6'2". Kyrie's maybe a little bit lighter, but in terms of height and weight and strength and all that sort of stuff, they're very similar, right? So if you're taking athleticism out of the account, because let's just call them equal, even if they're not exactly the same, let's just, for the sake of this argument, we're calling them equal in terms of athleticism and size and strength and all that stuff, right? So then, if Kyrie's more skilled, then why isn't he the better player than Steph? Good counterpoint there, right? And then Mike James responds with, I don't know, but Steph is better. It's intangibles in basketball, just how these go. So kind of got caught between a rock and a hard place there in that argument, because if he is more skilled and they're the same size, then he should be better, right? And I think it goes back to this thing where when people are thinking of basketball skill, you're ultimately going to be thinking of dribble moves and finishing. For the most part, people consider Kyrie Irving to be the best at those specific things. And so when you think of him as that, you think of him as the most skilled. I don't think there's a lot of people out there that are going to be arguing for Kyrie Irving as a better player than Steph. I think for the most part, assuming you're not like a huge Brooklyn Nets stan or a Kyrie stan, then you're going to agree that Steph is the better player than Kyrie. He has more stuff on his resume. And I think he's proven to be an overall better player than Kyrie Irving. Consensus, Steph Curry is one of the three best players in the NBA. If people are still going to argue skill wise, and if they are the same size, then and if Kyrie's more skilled, then why isn't he better? It's a good point. Ultimately, I think it just comes back to people's differing definitions in terms of what skill in basketball actually means. And ultimately, I think this argument is actually super silly. And part of me didn't even want to weigh in on this because I just think it's kind of ridiculous to debate a term that does not mean the same to everybody. It's why I hate talking about the whole super team thing. I'm going to go on a tangent for a second. It seems like every year, every time a new quote-unquote super team gets put together, right? This offseason, people are throwing that label around when talking about the Lakers. Last year, it was with the Brooklyn Nets, and so on and so forth, right? Every time a new team gets thrown together, we call them a super team. And then some people will get really mad and say, oh, well, that's not a super team because you have to have this and this and this to be qualified as a super team, or you have to be this good to be qualified as a super team, blah, 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 right? Ultimately, the definition of super team does not mean the same thing to every single person. So people who get really mad when you say, hey, this is a super team, or hey, this is not a super team, it doesn't really matter that much because I think that term, it does not just mean one thing. There is no like definition for super team in the NBA, right? I think colloquially it's just kind of thrown around as a really, really good basketball team. And maybe there is one every year, maybe there isn't. It just depends on who you are and how you view the game, right? So I think this ultimately is in a very similar vein as that, the term skill in basketball, because it doesn't mean the same thing to everyone, and people will throw that around and mean different things. So I think half the people out there believe that it's only in reference to your dribbling and your finishing, and some people believe that it's everything outside of athleticism, all the things that you're good at that make you a good basketball player. And so it's just up to interpretation, up to whatever you think. And that's ultimately where I fall on this. I think it's a silly argument, and it is just NBA Twitter because that's just what's going to happen during the offseason. People are going to get into all this crazy stuff that ultimately means nothing. And since nothing else is going on, we have nothing better to do. Everybody just sits and tweets into the void all day. So that's ultimately where I'm at on this. And I really think it is kind of silly, but I wanted to throw my 2 cents in there and say how I feel about it all. But yeah, that's about all I have on the Steph versus Kyrie NBA skilled Twitter extravaganza. Like I said at the top of the video, if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, ring the bell if you want to. Leave a comment letting me know what you guys think about this. Weigh in, give me your thoughts in the comments below. Why is this conversation happening? Why do people feel the way about it that they do? How do you feel about this debate? How do you feel about skill in basketball? What does it mean to you? And ultimately, how would you define that? Would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know if you like this style of video, trying to figure out what I want to talk about during the offseason, because like I said, there's not much going on in the NBA right now, and I've been really busy the last week, which is why I haven't been around as much. I'm going to try to start uploading more. Might be more green screen stuff, just because I've run into some troubles with my camera and everything for that other setup without the green screen, but I'm going to try to find out the proper mix of both. But anyway, that's going to be it for today. Let me know your thoughts on all that stuff, and I will see you guys in the next one.